Ben Carter, a former U.S. Army heavy-duty mechanic, struggles to make ends meet after his wife's passing, raising his young son, Logan, in a rundown house. Despite facing hardship and his neighbor's scorn, Ben lives by a strong code, helping others because it's the right thing to do, without expecting reward. This commitment leads him to fix a broken-down truck for a mysterious, stoic stranger on the roadside. The very next morning, an unexpected convoy of black SUVs arrives at Ben's home. The silent stranger from the truck emerges, revealing himself as General Nathaniel Caldwell, and presents Ben with an astonishing offer that could irrevocably change his and Logan's future. What incredible opportunity awaits this humble mechanic? If Ben's inspiring story of character and service moved you, imagine the other powerful tales we share. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to our channel for more stories honoring everyday heroes. Your support helps us bring these vital narratives to life. Ben Carter knelt beside the dusty old pickup, the sun bearing down on his back, grease staining the sleeves of his worn-out shirt. Tools lay scattered around him, hands steady as he tightened a bolt without saying a word. A sarcastic voice cut through the air, his neighbor, Mr. Dobs, leaning on his porch rail with a smirk. "Fixing some old farmer's truck for free, huh? Your own roof still leaking?" Ben didn't even glance up. He stayed focused, calm, the rhythm of the work centering him more than words ever could. A few feet away, Logan, his 5-year-old son, sat buckled in the back seat of their beat-up sedan, sipping juice with both hands, watching his father like he was something out of a superhero comic. The next morning, everything changed. Just as the fog was beginning to lift over the sleepy outskirts of Thomas, Georgia, 3 sleek black SUVs pulled up in front of Ben's aging house. The engines purred, then died. Doors opened in sync, the air shifting as men in dark suits stepped out. Behind his curtain, the same neighbor who'd mocked him yesterday now stood frozen, eyes wide. "Who the hell was that old man?" he whispered to himself, bewildered. But the real question, the one that hung in the silence, was this. Why would a high-level government convoy come all the way out here for a broke mechanic with nothing but a rusted toolbox, a kid to raise, and a stubborn sense of right and wrong? Inside the house, Ben's mornings followed a familiar rhythm, the gentle whir of a ceiling fan overhead, the soft creak of aged floorboards beneath his feet, the clink of spoons against an old ceramic bowl chipped at the rim. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. A far cry from the roaring chaos of the Army motor pool he once commanded, but it held a kind of quiet dignity. Once known as Sergeant Carter, a heavy-duty mechanic with the U.S. Army's 1st Armored Division, Ben now lived on the edges of the town in a house that seemed to sag with memory. The roof leaked when the rain came hard. The paint peeled off in long curls. The porch steps groaned under his boots, and the heater rattled like it was haunted. But this worn little house was home, for Ben and for Logan. At just 36, Ben already looked like a man life had tested again and again. His hands bore the scars and calluses of military service, but the deeper wounds came from loss. Melissa, his wife, had died 3 years ago after a brutal, drawn-out 11-month battle with cancer. She had been everything he wasn't, lively, organized, always 3 steps ahead. A high school math teacher who smiled with her whole face. She had plans, sensible, practical plans for every stage of their life. When to have kids, which neighborhoods had the best schools, how much to put in savings. But cancer didn't give a damn about plans. After she passed, Ben left active duty. The Army had done what it could, supporting him during her illness, offering time, space, resources. But once Melissa was gone, staying in no longer made sense. He couldn't be everywhere, and Logan needed a father more than the Army needed another mechanic. Since then, Ben's life had become a patchwork. Nothing steady, nothing glamorous, but enough to keep them going. He fixed up broken-down tractors in barns older than he was, hauled loads of fertilizer one day and drywall the next. He worked nights delivering groceries and weekends doing tire changes and brake repairs. Henderson's Auto, the shop run by his old Army buddy. The paychecks were small, scattered, sometimes late, but they stretched just enough to cover rent, groceries, and Logan's daycare fees. Ben didn't complain. He didn't have the time. Every morning he woke up before sunrise, made breakfast for Logan, usually cereal or scrambled eggs, then packed the little guy's backpack, kissed him on the forehead, and dropped him off at Miss Janine's daycare. And no matter how exhausted or grimy or soul-worn he felt by nightfall, he gave Logan a bath, read him a story, and tucked him in gently, whispering goodnight like it was a sacred ritual. Good dads show up, he reminded himself constantly, even when they're running on fumes. But the nights, they were harder. That's when the house got too quiet. That's when memories crept in. He would sit alone at the table, remembering the evenings he used to spend with Melissa on the back porch, coffee in hand, laughing, dreaming, planning. He remembered how her voice sounded just before she got sick. He remembered the silence of the hospital room after her last breath. The first time Logan said "Daddy" after the funeral. The nights Ben cried in the dark, clutching bills he didn't know how he'd pay. And yet, beneath all the hardship, Ben carried a quiet kind of strength. Not the showy kind that earned medals or salutes. His was the kind built silently, in the spaces between duty and heartbreak. It was forged on lonely nights when he stayed up fixing a neighbor's tractor for nothing but a handshake. In the cold when he stopped to change a stranger's tire, even as his own gas tank teetered on empty. Ben lived by a code, one passed down to him during boot camp by his first sergeant. You help because it's right, not because it gets you something. That code had stayed with him through war zones, hospital corridors, funeral homes, and now along the cracked sidewalks of this tired Georgia town. To Logan, his father wasn't just the man who fed him or bathed him or kissed his scraped knees. He was a hero in oil-stained jeans, a man who never gave up, no matter how heavy the load, no matter how long the road. Ben's hands bore the stories he never fully told. Little Logan would often run his fingers along the scars etched into the calloused skin, curiosity lighting up his face. "Did you get this one fixing a tank?" he'd ask with wonder. And every time Ben would offer a gentle smile and a quiet nod, never revealing the truth, that some wounds came from battles far beyond the mechanical. They didn't have much, not by the world's standards. There were no vacations to postcard places, no shiny new car in the driveway. But what they did have was something harder to define and far stronger. A life of quiet strength. A life built on perseverance and steady love. From the outside, theirs might have looked like a life easy to overlook. But within those worn walls, between bedtime stories and the clatter of carburetor rebuilds, something enduring was taking root. A bond, a legacy. One that had less to do with possessions and everything to do with how they chose to live each day. The Georgia sun hung low, turning the late afternoon into liquid gold, casting long streaks of shadow over the empty back highway. Ben Carter guided his beat-up Ford along the road, its engine humming a tired rhythm. In the back seat, Logan sat buckled in, legs swinging slightly, softly humming to himself between slow, satisfied sips from his juice bottle. They had just wrapped up a delivery for Henderson's Hardware. Nothing glamorous, just 20 bags of soil hauled out to a nursery on the edge of town. But it was enough to cover groceries for the week. That was the kind of math Ben did these days. Practical, grounded, necessary. As they curved around a bend, bordered by patchy farmland and quiet fields, something caught Ben's eye. An old truck, older than most, sat crookedly on the shoulder, its hood yawning open and white steam curling into the evening air like a flare for help. A man stood beside it. He was tall, silver-haired, his jacket stained with the stubborn earth of hard work. He didn't wave or call out, just stood there, staring under the hood in complete stillness, as if waiting, not for rescue but for something more elusive. Ben's foot eased off the gas. One hand stayed on the wheel, while the other reached instinctively for the worn canvas tool bag behind his seat. "Hang tight, buddy," he said to Logan, pulling the truck onto the gravel shoulder. "You gonna help him?" Logan asked, twisting in his seat to see. "Looks like he needs it," Ben replied, already stepping out into the dusty air. The man didn't move or speak. He merely nodded once, his gaze tracking Ben's approach with a kind of quiet appraisal. Most people stranded on the road showed signs: impatience, worry, relief. But not this one. He stood like a man not broken down by accident, but standing at a crossroads of something deeper. Ben lifted the hood higher and peered in, already diagnosing the machine with a practiced eye. Corroded terminals, he muttered. Timing might be off too. This old girl's got more years than I do. Still nothing from the man, just that cool, unreadable stare. Name's Ben, he offered, pulling tools from his bag. He extended a socket wrench, but the man didn't take it. He just kept watching, as though studying something beyond the fix, measuring the man offering help, not just the help itself. Ben didn't mind. He'd known enough old-timers, quiet veterans, weathered farmers, who didn't deal in small talk. Some folks just didn't give away their words easily, and that was fine with him. But the quiet didn't last. A voice rang out behind him, sharp and familiar. Well, look who's playing mechanic for strangers while his own damn house is falling apart. Ben didn't need to turn to recognize the sneer. It was Mr. Dobs, his neighbor and perennial thorn. The man strolled by on foot, eyes full of smugness. Ought to spend that time patching your own damn roof, Carter. Ben didn't respond. He kept working, wiping sweat from his brow as the sun sagged lower on the horizon. He'd long stopped caring about what men like Dobbs thought. They judged worth by the surface, money, property, image. Ben had let go of that the day Melissa died. Since then, he measured life differently, in effort, in love, in being there, even when no one else was. From the back seat, Logan watched everything, his little face pressed to the glass. His eyes were wide, chin balanced on the doorframe. What he saw wasn't just a father fixing a broken truck. To him, this was something much bigger. It was quiet heroism, the kind that didn't need an audience. Nearly 40 minutes passed, the sun dipped close to the treetops. Finally, the old engine coughed, rumbled, then caught into a steady, reliable idle. Ben gave the hood 2 solid taps and stepped back. She'll get you home, he said, wiping his hands clean on a rag. The man finally spoke, voice calm and low. You didn't ask my name. Ben gave a small shrug. Didn't need to, but I won't forget yours. The moment stretched. Not quite an ending, not really a goodbye either. It felt like a beginning of something unspoken. Then the man climbed back into his truck, gave Ben a single nod, and drove off. The dust rose behind him, then settled slowly as the vehicle disappeared down the road. Ben turned back toward his own truck. Logan's eyes met his, and what shone from the boy's face was priceless. Admiration, pure and bright, something wordless passed between them. Dad, Logan asked as Ben climbed in beside him, do you think he was someone important? Ben let out a breath and smiled faintly, starting the engine. Doesn't matter, buddy. He needed help, that's all I saw. He had carried that sense of duty from his military life straight into the messiness of civilian struggles. You help people, not because they've earned it, not because of who they are, but because it's the right thing to do. That's what the uniform had taught him, and it hadn't let go, even after the uniform was gone. That night, once Logan was tucked in and the house had settled into a hush, Ben couldn't shake the memory of the man he'd helped. Something about the encounter clung to him. It wasn't the silence that had stood out. It was the man himself, his presence, measured, deliberate, like someone used to holding control and knowing exactly when to release it. The feeling wasn't bad, not threatening, just incomplete, like a story that stopped halfway through a sentence. Ben didn't know the truck he'd repaired had carried more than a busted engine. It had been the shell of something larger, something layered beneath simple mechanics. It had carried intent, and in just a few hours that intent would arrive at his door. The next morning unfolded like most others, a new day pretending to be ordinary. The sharp scent of instant coffee filled the air as Ben stood in the kitchen, slicing a bruised apple for Logan's breakfast. The toaster coughed to life beside him, shooting up toast half burnt on one side, and the old ceiling fan above creaked in slow protest with every turn. The whole house groaned softly, as if it too was reluctant to face another day. Pale morning light trickled in through the thin curtains, casting slanted beams across the cluttered counter and the pile of unpaid bills that had long slipped from Ben's concern. He didn't even glance at them anymore. Across the table, Logan was in his own little world, babbling cheerfully between bites of toast about dinosaurs and trucks, his 2 great passions, with milk trailing down his chin. Ben smiled at the sound of his son's voice, letting it ground him until something outside shifted the air. A low rumble, then the crunch of tires rolling over gravel. Then, horns. Ben's brow furrowed. He moved to the front window, gently pulled the curtain back, and stopped cold. Parked in a clean, intimidating line along the curb were three black SUVs, identical, gleaming. They looked like intruders on this weathered street, too pristine to belong. Each one bore dark-tinted windows, polished frames, and the kind of government plates that spoke quietly but with undeniable weight. They didn't need lights or sirens. Their presence alone was enough. For a long second, Ben didn't move. His body reacted before his thoughts could catch up. That's military, or something very close. "Daddy?" Logan's small voice broke the stillness. There's people outside." Ben didn't answer. He opened the screen door and stepped barefoot onto the porch, a dish towel still tossed over his shoulder from breakfast. The yard was a patchwork of dry grass and Logan's toys scattered like forgotten memories. And in that moment, he felt seen, truly seen for the first time in a long while. Like the quiet life he'd built with careful hands had just been thrust under a spotlight. The door of the middle SUV opened. A tall man in plain clothes stepped out, silver-haired and poised. He carried himself with a posture that sparked muscle memory in Ben. Back straight, chin up, eyes forward. The kind of bearing you don't forget once you've served. Two others followed behind him, scanning the perimeter with practiced, wordless efficiency. The silver-haired man walked toward the porch, his stride calm but sure, like he belonged wherever he stepped. When he reached the first step, he pulled a leather folder from under his arm and opened it, flashing a badge and credentials. "Mr. Carter," he said evenly, "my name is Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Whitaker, formerly of Joint Special Operations Command. We're here representing the Veteran Personnel Outreach Division. Someone you encountered yesterday would like to speak with you." Ben's heart thudded once. Hard, his thoughts raced through every bad possibility. Was there some error with his discharge? Some red flag in the system? A mix-up with Melissa's parents over custody? A VA investigation? But before he could spiral further, the rear door of the SUV opened again. A figure stepped out, tall, steady, familiar. It was him, the man from the broken-down truck. But gone was the grease-stained jacket and weariness. Now he wore a pressed gray blazer, boots shined to a mirror finish. His posture hadn't changed, nor had the calm authority in his gaze. But now it was unmistakable. Command. Ben's spine straightened, instinct overriding thought. You didn't need orders to know when you were in the presence of rank. "Ben Carter," the man said, voice deep and unwavering. "I'm General Nathaniel Caldwell, retired. I served as Commander of Operations in Afghanistan. These days, I advise the Department of Defense." He paused, letting the weight of that settle. "Yesterday, you helped me, fixed my truck, no questions asked." Ben's jaw tightened. "Sir, I didn't know." "I know," Caldwell said, cutting in gently but firmly. He nodded once. "And that's exactly why I'm here." He glanced past Ben toward the house. "May we come inside?" There was a beat of hesitation, reflex more than reluctance. Then Ben nodded once and stepped back, holding the door open. "Please, read." Inside, Logan looked up, eyes wide at the sight of strangers stepping into his home. Caldwell's expression softened as he crouched slightly, leveling with the boy's height. "You must be Logan," he said warmly. "Your dad's a good man." Logan blinked up at him, then nodded solemnly. "He fixes stuff. Like, everything." Ben couldn't help the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips as he gently nudged Logan toward his room. "Go play for a while, buddy. I'll be right here." Back in the kitchen, Ben sat down across from Caldwell. His hands rested on the table, open, steady, military still in his bones. And he waited. Ben Carter sat in his kitchen, though it felt less like home now and more like a place suspended in time. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and the refrigerator made a dull clunking sound that reminded him something was always just about to give out. This wasn't Iraq. It wasn't Germany. This was a debrief, sure, but one that took place around a table stained by years of coffee rings and crayon marks. Across from him, General Nathaniel Caldwell leaned forward, his voice taking on a firmer edge. Yesterday, he said, you did more than just fix a truck. You demonstrated a principle we've been trying to find for years. You helped someone without knowing his name, rank, or mission. That's exactly the kind of character this country is starving for. Then Caldwell slid an envelope across the worn table. I'd like to make you an offer, he said. Ben didn't reach for it. His eyes stayed on the envelope, crisp-edged and heavy with government formality, the kind that usually carried either a good news or very bad news. He could feel the weight of it without touching it. What kind of offer, he asked. Caldwell gave a faint, knowing smile. One that could change everything. For you and for your son. Outside, the three black SUVs sat quietly by the curb. But inside, Ben's entire world had begun to shift. He stared at the envelope, then back at Caldwell, who sat at his kitchen table like he belonged there. His presence filled the room. Not loud, but solid. Like the kind of man who didn't say much unless it mattered. You're offering me a job? Ben asked finally. Because I fixed your truck? Caldwell didn't flinch. No, Mr. Carter. I'm offering you a future. Because of why you fixed it. Ben leaned back slightly in his chair. His posture stayed guarded. I don't have a degree. I haven't stepped foot in any official facility since I left the service. Most days, I'm just crawling under tractors or hunting down parts in the next county over. I'm not anybody special. Caldwell's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. That's where you were wrong. You're exactly who we need. And that toolbox in your truck? That's your resume. Ben let out a breath of a laugh, quiet, half amused, half unsure. It was a sound born of disbelief and long-worn habit. So, this is a recruitment pitch? Something like that, Caldwell replied, voice steady. We're about to launch a new pilot program, the Veteran Technical Corps. It's designed for people like you, veterans with hands-on experience, real-world skills. We're building a team to help repair and modernize the nation's infrastructure. Power grids, water systems, emergency services, communications. The parts of this country most people don't think about until they stop working. Ben tilted his head, skeptical. So you want me to fix broken pipes? No, Caldwell said, lowering his voice slightly. I want you to help fix a broken system. One where people like you, disciplined, capable, and completely overlooked, are left to scrape by just because you didn't take the traditional path. That needs to change. He tapped the envelope gently. Inside is a complete offer. Salary, 3 times what you're making now. Housing assistance, full health coverage, a guaranteed post in Georgia, and a tuition voucher for Logan when he's old enough. Ben didn't move. His fingers stayed on either side of the envelope like it might vanish if he wasn't careful. His mind raced. He thought of Logan's sneakers, the ones that were already too small when he bought them secondhand. He pictured the permanent rust ring in the bathtub, the spot on the ceiling where water darkened the plaster, and the night he sat on the floor in the bathroom, crying silently, because he couldn't afford groceries and a roof patch in the same week. Why me? He asked, his voice low. Why not someone with credentials? Because credentials don't always equal character, Caldwell answered simply. Yesterday, I staged my 14th roadside breakdown across 3 states. You were the first to stop. No hesitation, no questions, no payment, no clue who I was. Ben sat frozen. The words didn't feel real, not right away. You saw someone in trouble, Caldwell continued, and you helped. That tells me more than any resume ever could. The kitchen fell silent again. From down the hall came the faint sound of Logan humming to himself. The curtains shifted with the breeze. It was a quiet, ordinary moment, but everything in Ben's world had changed. Finally, he reached for the envelope and opened it slowly, almost reverently. Inside was everything Caldwell said: details, numbers, contact info, real terms. Not just a handshake and a good luck nod, a roadmap, a structure, a future. He swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he said, I thought people like me didn't get noticed anymore. Caldwell's voice softened as he replied, We notice, and now it's time to act on that. Ben nodded slowly. He wasn't entirely sure he was ready, not really, but he knew he couldn't keep living in this half-survival mode, one foot in the past, one eye always watching for the next blow. Logan deserved more than just scraping by. Maybe, just maybe, what was happening now wasn't some miraculous twist of fate. Maybe it was simply long overdue recognition for a man who'd quietly kept doing what was right, long after anyone was watching or even cared. Caldwell buttoned his jacket with crisp precision. "You've got 48 hours," he said. "Training starts next month in Atlanta. You'll be home on weekends." Ben rose, matching Caldwell's stance, and they shook hands. Firm, no need for words. The kind of handshake that passed between soldiers who understood more than they said. As Caldwell reached the door, he paused and glanced back. "Oh," he added casually, "bring your tools. First day's a hands-on assessment." Ben allowed a smile to break through. "That," he said, "I can do." When the black SUVs pulled away and the dust settled behind them, Ben stood on the porch with the envelope still in hand, leaning on the railing. He stared down the road, uncertain of where it might lead. But for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel afraid to follow it. It took 6 months. 6 months for Ben Carter's life to change in ways he never thought possible. The early days at the Veteran Technical Corps Training Center in Atlanta were nothing short of overwhelming. He stepped into classrooms filled with men and women who bore the same hard years he did. Former soldiers, mechanics, sailors, medics, all with calloused hands, tired eyes, and stories stitched deep into their skin. Every single one of them had lived through service and survived the struggle that followed. At times, Ben doubted himself. The systems were new. Technology had moved on, and it had been 10 years since he'd last sat in a classroom, let alone taken notes. But his hands still remembered. So did his instincts. The same quiet grit that had pulled him through gunfire and grief now kept him pushing through confusion and fatigue. Slowly, steadily, his confidence returned. He raised his hand when he didn't understand something. He stayed late to review and catch up, and he reached out to help others who had started to fall behind. When it came time for the hands-on assessments, Ben didn't just pass. He stepped forward, took the lead. And by the time the program ended, the instructors didn't just hand him a certificate, they offered him a leadership position. "You've got something rare," his supervisor had told him. "Experience, humility, and the respect of everyone around you." Back home, change was happening there too. Logan was 6 now, full of questions and energy. He was enrolled in a better school. Their new rental house was far from fancy, but it had solid heat, a roof that didn't leak, and a modest little backyard where Ben spent a weekend building a sandbox with his own 2 hands. He still fixed things: broken engines, leaky faucets, even a neighbor's lawnmower that had seen better days. But now he did it because he wanted to, not because he had to. It wasn't desperation anymore. It was purpose. The job that followed training placed Ben in charge of infrastructure assessments throughout rural Georgia. He coordinated with utility crews, worked side by side with water treatment teams, and helped guide younger recruits just entering the program. Every morning when he laced up his boots, he remembered what it had felt like to be seen, to have someone look past the old clothes, the worn toolbox, and recognize potential. And then, a year later, came the unexpected, an invitation to Washington, D.C. General Caldwell, now a senior advisor to the president, wanted Ben to speak at a congressional briefing on veteran workforce development. The idea of public speaking had never crossed Ben's mind before. He had never even held a microphone. But when the moment came, and he walked into that room in a plain gray suit that still felt stiff and unfamiliar, he wasn't nervous. He just told the truth. "I didn't ask for a handout," he told the committee. "I asked for a chance to keep serving, and I got one. Not because of my resume, but because someone believed my character still mattered." Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled notes. But Ben wasn't there for the headlines. He was there for every veteran who had ever taken off the uniform and stepped into a world that suddenly forgot them. After that, the momentum grew. The program expanded. More states adopted the Veteran Technical Corps model, working with local technical colleges and public agencies. And right at the center of it all stood Ben. No longer just a mechanic or a survivor, but a mentor, a leader, a living reminder of what could happen when the nation chose to remember those who once served it. His days were full: site visits, project evaluations, training sessions. But no matter how packed his schedule became, he always made time for Logan. They still ate dinner together every night, still read bedtime stories, still held on to the rituals that mattered most. Because for Ben Carter, the mission had never really ended. It had just changed. Ben still rebuilt engines on the weekends, just like he always had. Sometimes he and Logan would stop by Mr. Dobbs' place, fixing a broken heater, replacing a stubborn light fixture, helping in quiet ways even when it wasn't asked. One day Logan had looked up at him, brows furrowed with innocent confusion. "Why do you help someone who was mean to you?" he asked. Ben had simply smiled, his eyes soft but steady, because helping people isn't about who they are. It's about who we are. In the corner of his new office, tucked away from view, sat an old envelope, the same one General Caldwell had handed him all that time ago. Ben had never thrown it out. It served as a silent reminder that opportunity doesn't always come with fanfare or grand entrances. Sometimes it arrives quietly, riding in 3 black SUVs, carried by a stranger with a calm voice, or hidden beneath the hood of a stalled truck. That encounter had shifted the course of his life. He'd gone from being overlooked to becoming essential, from survival to service again. But through it all, something within him never changed, his belief that people were worth fixing for. And sometimes in repairing one small thing, you started to heal something much bigger. It all began with a story. Not a flashy news segment or a viral video, but something simpler, a story told in a congressional hearing room where General Nathaniel Caldwell stood tall before lawmakers. He spoke of a man who had knelt down beside a stranger's broken-down truck, grease coating his hands, while his 4-year-old son waited quietly in the car. He called it an act of invisible service, and he said that single moment carried more weight than any resume or degree ever could. It was worth believing in, worth building from. The room, filled with screens glowing cold blue and skeptical eyes behind polished lenses, had been tense at first. But as Caldwell spoke, calm, deliberate, unwavering, the atmosphere began to shift. He didn't speak from pity. He spoke from purpose. "We spend billions on readiness, on equipment, technology, operations," he said. "But the real strength of this country lives in people like Ben Carter. Not because they wore the uniform, but because when they took it off, they kept living by its code." That hearing started something. The press picked it up. Veteran advocacy groups amplified the message. And soon Ben's quiet roadside moment, once known only to him, Logan, and a stalled engine, was echoing across America. From small towns in Nebraska to flood-damaged neighborhoods in Louisiana, from aging power grids in Appalachia to forgotten backroads, places where things were broken. Veterans like Ben were already there, skilled, underappreciated, and more than ready to serve again. Applications to the Veteran Technical Corps surged. Colleges and trade schools launched new programs and partnerships. Local governments began organizing regional chapters. And Ben? He just kept working. He turned down morning show interviews, passed on a book deal. When asked why, he answered simply, "I didn't fix that truck to be remembered. I fixed it because someone once fixed mine." But quietly behind the scenes, Ben had become something else, a voice of experience, of wisdom earned the hard way. He joined advisory panels, helped build practical assessments, and traveled from state to state, speaking with veterans who'd lost direction. And no matter where he went, he listened. One evening, after a town hall in rural Kansas, a woman in her 60s walked up to him. Her son had served. He came home broken, adrift, unable to find work, until he joined the Corps. Now he was building solar arrays, smiling again. "You gave me my boy back," she whispered, holding his hand. Her eyes shimmered with something deeper than gratitude. Ben never saw himself as a hero. He still drove the same beat-up truck, still wore the same old boots, still preferred silence over speeches. But he had come to understand something simple and powerful, that small actions create wide ripples. One truck, one decision, one lifted life, and then another, and another. As for Caldwell, he never stopped telling that story, the one about the man who knelt down without needing a name, who didn't ask for attention, who simply did the right thing. He kept returning to it, using it to ground policy in something real. something human. We don't just need to thank our veterans, Caldwell told Congress. We need to empower them. Let them keep building, fixing, leading. Not out of charity, but because they're damn good at it. Ben Carter had once felt invisible. Now his values, quiet, steadfast, deeply rooted, were shaping national policy. And back in Georgia, he and Logan still sat on the porch some evenings, side by side in the fading light, surrounded by quiet and the strength of a steady home. Not every hero keeps the uniform on. Some hang it up, pull on faded jeans, get their hands dirty, and keep doing what's right, whether anyone's watching or not. Ben Carter's story was never about fame, medals, or speeches. It was about something older, something passed down in silence, from father to son, from soldier to citizen. From one generation to the next, the gesture passed quietly, without ceremony, without a headline. A simple act of kindness, one that didn't shout for attention, but instead whispered into someone's life and changed its course forever. It didn't make the evening news, no applause followed, yet it lit a spark, first in one person, then in a program built around that same spirit, and eventually in a nation that had been waiting for someone to simply care. In a country where countless people feel invisible, veterans trying to find their footing again, laborers working with tired hands and quiet pride, single parents holding their families together with grit and hope, maybe the real question isn't about who holds power. Maybe it's about who's still showing up, who's still stepping forward, offering help not because they have to, but because it's what they believe in. Who's still out there repairing what's broken, lifting what's fallen, doing good not for applause, but because it's right. So now ask yourself this: have you ever done something good for someone, not for a paycheck, not for praise, but simply because it felt like the right thing to do? Or maybe there was a moment when someone did that for you, when a stranger's quiet compassion met you exactly where you were. Those stories matter. No matter how small, how ordinary they may seem, they echo. They have a way of reaching someone else who might just need to believe in good again. If you have one of those stories, we invite you to share it. Not for likes, not for followers, but because someone out there may need the reminder that kindness still exists, that decency endures. Thank you for being here, for giving your time and heart to a story like this. If it stirred something in you, made you reflect, or reminded you of someone who showed you what quiet strength looks like, someone who helped not out of duty, but from the core of who they are, then pass this along. Share it with a friend, and stay with us for more stories that honor the unseen, the steady, the everyday heroes, because the most lasting change doesn't always come from commands. It rises from character. And that's something we should never forget.